Hello, everyone. Welcome to the definition and components of conflict interaction video. You may be asking yourself, when does conflict interaction happen? Well, we're going to answer that question here, and then we're going to look at the components of conflict, and we're going to do some activities while doing that. So, a conflict happens when two or more parties who are interdependent perceive incompatible goals, and they perceive threats to their resources, needs, or values. And this was a definition that was developed by Morton Deutsch, who's considered the great granddaddy of conflict resolution studies. Let's break this down. Let's look at all the parts of Morton Deutsch's definition of conflict, and we'll do some activities along the way so that you can apply what you're learning, and that'll help you retain it. The first component were parties, conflict parties. Conflict parties are people who have conflict. A party could be one person or a group of people. There can be 2, 3, or more conflict parties, and unlike your Saturday night party, they usually aren't fun. So when I say that it could be a party can be one person, so it could be two siblings, a brother and sister. That could be a party. Or it could be two families. So the McCoys and the Hatfields, the famous people from the Appalachian Mountains who had conflict, families against families, okay? Could be community groups against each other. It could be corporations. Or it could be two departments, or it could be just two coworkers, okay? So these are different ways that people can connect or not connect with others when they have conflicts. The second component in here is that the parties are interdependent. Parties that rely on each other, they exist in a state of interdependence. Another way to frame this is to say that each has mutual dependence. We need the other person for something or for many things. The fact that people are depending on each other, that creates a situation that requires cooperation to meet goals, and the cooperation doesn't always happen. Other times their goals might shift, or they have a combination of competing and compatible goals, and so that generates conflict. When the goals diverge, that means they go in different directions. That's when people have conflict. So there's different parties, and these parties are interdependent as the first two components of conflict. Another component of conflict is that there's a perception of threat. Perception plays a major role in conflict. People can see the same thing but have a different interpretation, as in the proverbial half empty, half full glass of water. What I want you to do right now is to stop the video and go to this webpage that I have posted that has a pretty famous image on there of a woman. And I want you to look at this woman and answer some discussion questions that you'll see now on the discussion page of our website. So that's your next activity, is to answer those questions. Now that you've seen how perception can play a role, let's look at what people might be perceiving that can lead to conflict. They may be perceiving threats to their resources, such as money or land or water or oil or space or housing or jobs. These are things that people need and use to live. The next set of things that people might be threatened around are their needs, and these needs are social and psychological requirements like inclusion or affection or control or appreciation or esteem or belonging, wanting to be respected. There's lots of different social psychological needs, and the ones that I mentioned are some of the ones that are typically threatened in conflict. The last area or source of conflict that we're looking at are values. When people have different values, that can be a huge reason for conflicts. I'm sure you could think of some in our society, some values conflicts, like gun control versus gun rights, or right to life versus the pro-life versus the pro-choice movement. Yeah. So there's lots and lots of conflicts, like the conflicts around, what do we do about the border between the US and Mexico? All these things. These are all to do with values that people fight about. And this is what people think of as right or wrong, what people think is good or bad, what they think is moral, immoral. And these are the conflicts that are typically the hardest to resolve. There are social structures that can increase the perception of threat and actually the actual threats that exist. Some of these social structures that increase the experience and the perception of threat are hierarchy. Okay, we live in a land that's supposed to have equality and equal opportunity, and yet most of us operate within hierarchical structures. And one of the first hierarchies that we're in are our families, with our parents at the top, and then the kids, that there's the oldest kid versus the youngest kid, and then the kids versus the dog versus the cat versus the mouse. Okay, so these are hierarchies that people live in. The more hierarchical the structures, the more there's the possibility for tensions. Another thing that generates conflict are competitive structures. So if we're trying to compete, then we're at odds with each other, because typically there can only be one winner. Another thing that increases competition or increases threat is inequality. So we are seeing a lot of conflict right now in our society at large. It's in the media every single day. We're having social movements throughout the country that are igniting social movements around the world for racial equality. And prior to that, we had the Me Too movement, which had to do with gender equality and so on. So we've had a lot of social movements in this country that have led to changes, and the inequality that spurred the social movements is a source of conflict. What I want you to do now is to try an experiment. So you might not be ready to do this. So you might have to recruit a family member or friend. So you might have to do this a little bit later, but I really would like you to do this because it's going to help you understand the information that we're going over today. So what I want you to do is, with a family member or friend, I want you to play the game Thumb War that many of you have played. And if you have never played it, you can go to this YouTube channel, this YouTube site, and see it. It's very quick on here and kind of amusing to people playing. So after you've, or while you're playing it, keep track of how many times you and your partner touch. So tell your partner to keep score. So just keep going for a whole minute. If you get a touch, then start over again. And so it looks kind of like this, okay? So you're trying to touch the person, the other person's trying to get you down and pin you down, right? So keep track of how many you get, how many the other person gets, okay? When you're finished playing, and I want you to only play for 1 minute, so set a timer. Then what I want you to do is, with the same person, I want you to change the frame. Now I want you to play thumb touch teamwork. I want you to work together and see how many touches that both of you can get when you work as a team instead of competing against each other. When you're finished with that, then there's going to be a discussion activity for you to do. So this is your next discussion activity. Here's what you're going to find in the discussion activity. You're gonna share with the class how many touches you got and how many as individuals. Then I want you to share how many touches you got when you worked as a team. And then I want you to compare and contrast the two processes. So write down what it was like for you to compete versus when you cooperated with the other person. And we'll have an interesting discussion about that on our website. So those are some things to do. And then when you're done, come on back to the video. Another aspect of conflict is that it gets expressed. If I have some negative feelings about something, or I'm feeling tense or stressed, but I don't say anything to the other person that I'm having the conflict with, or the other people, then we don't have a conflict yet because they don't know about it. It has to get expressed so that there's mutual knowledge that there is a conflict happening. So we talk about that as the point of expression. And this point of expression is key to what happens, how it happens, and typically then there's consequences based on how it's done. So when there's a conflict and the perceptions of the conflict get expressed. So if I'm upset that my sister borrowed my sweater without asking and I tell her, then she knows. And I could say it by being sarcastic, or I could be very direct and say it really bothers me when you take my sweater without asking, or I could yell and scream at her and tell her she's irresponsible and so on. So there's different ways that I could express that perception. And the feelings that are going to come out. Am I going to be angry? Am I going to be sad? Am I going to be calm? So whatever the feelings are, that's all part of the expression. And that has a huge influence on what then happens in the conflict. The way that it gets expressed is huge. Now that I've gone through all the material about this conflict and the components and the definition of it, I want you to watch this Sesame Street video of a very famous actor talking to the two-headed monster, which some of you may remember from your younger days. And he's going to tell him to engage in conflict. You're going to watch what happens. And then when you're done with that, you are then going to go to our final quiz for this module, which is the conflict definition and components quiz. When you're done with this quiz, then congratulations, because you have now completed the second video and set of activities for module 2. If you want to delve deeper into the subject matter, you can go ahead and read the posted chapters from Wilmot and Hawker that I have posted on the modules page and for this module. And it's going to tell you some of this information that I've given you, and it's going to have some additional information. Some of it will be covering in future sessions, future videos or classes. But if you want more depth and you want to know where I got some of the ideas, some of them are from there and some of them are just from the work that I've been doing over the last 30 years on managing conflict and reading about conflict. So that's it for today. And I'm looking forward to seeing you later on this week. Take care.